Make a start. I want to welcome everyone to the Bay of Plenty Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Joint Committee meeting. I remind members and staff that this meeting has been recorded and the recording will be made available on the Bay of Plenty Regional Council website following the meeting. I also remind all present that local government decision making affords no protection to councillors, council officers and the public for comments made during the meetings that are subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined to be slanderous. Since it's a new venue for us, I'd just also like to remind members that unlike in the regional council, the red light means you're live rather than the green light, so everyone's aware. So without further ado, I'll ask Stace to open us up with a karakia, please. Thank you, Stace. So I'll move on to the apologies. Apologies have been received from Mayor Phelan Tunui, Deputy Mayor Kai Fong, Commission Chair Anne Tolley, Councillor Owen Scott, Deputy Mayor Aaron Rangahika, and Lily Folds. Any further apologies? No? I'll also note we've got David Moore and Leslie Imek on Zoom, joining us via Zoom. So can I have a mover and seconder to receive the apologies? Councillor Campbell, Mayor Luca. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. I'm not aware of anyone for public forum. There's no items not on the agenda. There's no change to the order of business. Does anyone have a declaration of interest? No? Okay. So we'll move on to item number 6, which is the minutes to approve and confirm. So the Bay of Plenty Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Joint Committee minutes of the 30th of June. Can I have a mover and seconder to confirm these minutes, please? Commissioner Worsley and Mayor Campbell. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. The extraordinary meeting on the 22nd of August. Mover and seconder, please. Yes, Mayor Tapsell, I'll second that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. The hearings minutes from the 4th of September. I'll move that, and I think Mayor Tapsell will have to probably second that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. And then the deliberations minutes from the 4th of September. I'll move that, and Mayor Tapsell, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. So straight on to item number 7, reports on page 49, which is the annual plan dashboard and first quarter reporting. So that's over to Clinton.
Thank you, Chair. The paper I'll take as read with the dashboard is just a reminder for members that going forward now, this dashboard is showing what work the group office is doing. In other words, Emergency Management Bay Plenty against the group annual plan. But we do encourage individual member councils to also provide reporting from themselves to this committee as well. The only update will be is we got some questions around the training stats for a further breakdown of those who attend, because in your report it will just say numbers attended. The staff have produced a supplementary which is available for those interested, but future reports will then break it down further. Thank you, Chair.
Any questions of Clinton? No? Okay. So we'll look for a mover and seconder for the recommendations. Councillor Campbell, Commissioner Worsley. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Item 7.2 on page 56, the Controller and Recovery Manager statutory appointments. So, Clinton,
yeah,
straightforward one.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Very straightforward. Again, as the committee knows, to appoint the controllers or recovery managers at group and local level. I have taken the opportunity to invite Stace Tahiri and Chris Brewer to join us. Unfortunately, Adele Henderson wasn't available this morning, but I thought it's good for this committee to start meeting those people that have been appointed by this committee because they will become your legal leads in different phases. So Chris Brewer is to be appointed as an alternate group controller, so one of those to support Mark in that role, and Stace Tahiti is to be appointed as an alternate group recovery manager. And you'll hear later on our review how we have some risks in our statutory appointment space. So these are starting to address those gaps. I don't know if the chair would allow them a 30-second each or so just to introduce themselves.
I think that'd be a lovely idea. So Stace, would you like to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about yourself?
Kia ora koutou. Through the chair, thank you very much for allowing me the chance to speak. So, for those that don't know, I'm Stace Tahiti. I'm the acting planning manager with Emergency Management Bay of Plenty. I have a vast background in emergency management that spans right back to my career from the military with military police, and then through local government, Manawatu Wanganui Regional Council, and then through Bay of Plenty Regional Council and Emergency Management Bay of Plenty. I relish the chance to get into this position and learn a lot and get the mahi done. So kia ora, thank you.
Thank you. Chris?
Through the chair, kia ora koutou, ko Chris Brewer tōku ingoa. So it's both a privilege and an honour to have your trust placed in me to be appointed as the alternate group controller. I'm currently the interim people and capability lead at Toi Moana Bay of Plenty Regional Council, and have been there for the best part of 10 years, and for the majority of that time been involved with emergency management, working alongside likes of Stace here and the rest of the team. So very much looking forward to working more closely with the team and learning from them, and as well as everyone here in the room as well, establishing those strong relationships, particularly as we're in peacetime now. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you to you both. I guess it's one of those things where we hope your services aren't required, but you're there just in case, so thank you. Is there any questions anyone would like to ask them, or make any comments? No? No. Okay, so there's five recommend... Oh, Mayor Tapsell, sorry. You just press the button there.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Look, I just wanted to acknowledge the background that this team is bringing on board. I think these appointments are fantastic. Please pass our regards on to Adele when she comes too, but it was fantastic to be able to see the background of Chris, of Stace and of Adele, especially in other areas, not just civil defence, defence in one way for you, defence of the country. But yeah, it was just gave me great confidence reading those in the instance if we did require these people to step up and show leadership and lead our region through this. I would have great confidence in that. So we wish you all the best. But again, yes, we hope we don't require your services in those roles. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Tapsell. I'm sure those kind words are much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
So if there's no other comments, there are 5 recommendations there. Commissioner Worsley, Mayor Tapsell seconding. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, gentlemen. Item 7.3, we move to the annual report on page 62. So, Clinton.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'll take the report as read. It's the report that outlines our progress and our achievements from the last annual plan. So it outlines highlights achieved across the region and including group and local levels. And it also paints a great picture of the great work that has been done despite all the challenges we've had. What I would like to draw attention to on the annual report is a supplementary piece we've added in on page 89, which is just an outline of the CDM Group deployment overview. And I think this is going to become important as we move forward, as we see increasing events across New Zealand, that we end up going and assisting other regions. So the staff pulled together a sort of an analysis based on formulas to show you how many staff went over the year, how many hours were worked, and acknowledging those hours worked there, they're not hours not spent on our own work programs, but it's in the spirit of supporting our neighbours and the estimated cost to that. I feel that's going to be an ongoing thing, if not increasing thing, with what we're seeing happening. So we'll be monitoring that more closely and bringing that to attention. But also I think it's important to note that when we are requiring the assistance, that's equally how the other groups will come and support us as well. So yeah, happy to take any questions on the annual plan, and Stace is here to support that as well.
Thank you, Clinton. So open up to questions. Anything you want to ask Clinton? No? Okay. So in which case we have two recommendations there: to receive the report and approve the annual report. So can I look for a mover and seconder for those, please? Councillor Campbell, Mayor Luca. No further debate, which is I shall put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Moving on to page 90 now, with the Joint Committee Hearings Subcommittee Amendments Report on page 90.
Thank you, Chair. Cara, Principal Advisor in Emerging Management Bay of Plenty, will be presenting this report, as she did a fantastic job of steering the committee through our public submission process. So I'll be handing over to Cara. Thank you.
Morena tātou. I'm 95% sure I've met all of you before, but just as a reminder, I'm Cara Gordon, Principal Advisor, Emergency Management at MBOP, and I've had the pleasure of leading the group plan development process. So as members are aware, we went through the process of developing the group plan over the past 12 to 18 months, and we're very excited to be at the point of having gone through our public submission and hearings process. Now, that process was led by a subcommittee of this committee, the hearings panel, which was made up of Mayor Tapsell, who was kindly our chair, Mayor Denya, and Mayor Tanui, who is obviously absent today. In order to undertake that process, we followed a legislative mandate where it was a month of public consultation, and we sought submissions from members of the public on the draft document that went through this committee at our last meeting round. We received 8 submissions from members of the public, and 2 of those submitters wanted to speak to their submissions. One thing I would like to note on that is while we only received those 8 submissions, we did in our first round of public consultation have 250 submitters. So we had that from that first round, and we like to think that we reflected that feedback, and that's what showed in that second round being much tighter. In order to go through that submission process, we had those members come and speak to us, and then we had a closed deliberation session post those hearings. And we went through a 2-step process there as well. We deliberated through the public submissions, and then we moved through to the NEMA submissions as well. So I'll talk to both of those points. So the public submissions were quite operationally focused. They have not led to a huge number of changes in the group plan, but obviously have led to some changes in that document. And those are all summarised in the attachment that you have with this pack. Where they were those submissions were operationally focused, we tended to have an action that fed into our normal business as usual work program. So for example, engaging more closely with our social link and within our operational arrangements rather than reflecting major changes within the group plan. So that was quite common for those submissions. Would the panel like to say anything, or the members of the panel that are here like to say anything on those public submissions?
Mayor Tapsell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. Look, I just want to thank staff for how well organised the process was. I thought it was fantastic to get a summary, but also in some cases where we didn't require any change into the plan, it was because there was already some good conversations, some suggestions, and perhaps even some future work together with those people or organisations that did submit. So it was really enjoyable and such a pleasure to be able to chair that. Thank you. And I also thought it was very interesting and good that there were some additional hazards that were identified by the public that they wished us to consider. And it was a very good process for us to be able to go through, to hear those out and then take those on board too. So I'm very pleased with the final result. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll concur with Mayor Tapsell and say it was a well-run process. We've got some good feedback, particularly on volunteer services, heat waves, disability issues too. So I think there was some good feedback there, and I appreciate the way the staff ran the process. So thank you for that.
Cool. Thank you, everybody, and we appreciated your feedback, and I know the members of the public who submitted did as well. So following that public submission deliberations, we then moved into the NEMA technical review. So for context, that's also a legislative process, and the National Emergency Management Agency undertake a full review of all group plans, and they spread it out amongst the entire organisation, so we get subject matter experts from across NEMA feeding back on different components. We were really pleased that the feedback that came through wasn't substantial. There are a number of pieces of feedback and changes that they recommended, but they really supported the approach that we took to this group plan. So that was very reassuring for us to hear, particularly as this committee knows, we'd moved from a quite operational document for previous group plans into more of a strategic focused document. So we were very pleased to hear that NEMA supported that approach. We went through with the panel all of the submissions that NEMA provided, and the vast majority of those were accepted, and a couple of them were accepted with partial changes, so we understood the intent, but we had a different way of approaching that change. And then there were a couple where we did not support those based on the panel's deliberations around how we wanted to frame, for example, our partnership with iwi, and also how we wanted to have our operational documentation separate from the group plan to allow a faster update process if that was required. So what all of that led to was the version of the group plan that we sent out within the minutes, and you'll see a number of yellow highlights in that document. Those yellow highlights reflect where those key changes were made. We didn't highlight, if we had a typo or something like that. It was where the key substantive changes were made. We highlighted in that document to make it nice and easy for this committee to review those changes. We are also separately went through a process just to do a full graphics review. I do have a couple of copies of a nicer version of the group plan with the photos and the like embedded if any members would like to see that. So what that means is we are now seeking this committee's approval to send this version of the plan to ministerial review. That is also a legislative process. The Minister of Emergency Management has 30 days in which to review the group plan. We are aware, however, with the elections that things will likely get caught up. There is a chance NEMA will be able to get this document through the Minister of Emergency Management prior to the elections in a week and a bit, but we're not expecting that to be the case. We're expecting it to be held until post-elections when the new Minister of Emergency Management, whoever that may be, is able to step in and take on that role. So are there any further comments from our panel? Or any questions for me?
I'll open up for questions, and I see that Councillor Emick has raised her hand, so please go ahead, Councillor Emick.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Cara, for that. I might have kind of missed it in the report about the submissions, but tsunamis rate very highly, as an area of concern. And it was kind of like, what are we doing next? Because I thought there was going to be some sort of tsunami education program with all the new modelling in there. Now, I don't know if it's in this report or elsewhere in the meeting. Because if something was coming at the end of July, then it was coming at the end of September, and now we're knocking on the door of October, and the communities are wondering what's changed, what's new, what's next.
Clinton, can I pass that to you, please?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Yes, you're quite right. We had brought stuff about tsunami to this committee over the time, and there were slight delays as we worked through with all the member coastal councils on refining their maps, etc. What we can tell you is that we are busy with a planned launch, and comms has gone out to all your communication staff in your respective councils with information on that for next week. And Lisa is leading our comms across the group, and she's working closely with your communication advisors. You should have, if not already, should be receiving briefing packs and updates on what that's happening. The media is being briefed by Lisa with embargoed material for next week. Thank you.
Just to follow up through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please go ahead.
As part of that education sort of program, when we had the lady speak to us that visited Japan, that Tsunami Tendenko program of educating school children and the wider community about I'll be okay, I know where to go. Are we incorporating that and as part of our rollout?
Yes, Councillor, we are. We are taking lessons from Japan. I think this committee received a report back from some of our staff we have an exchange program with them, and we had sent staff over to Japan to learn. So a lot of those lessons have been incorporated into our work and our education plans.
Okay, super, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I have Mayor Luca next, please.
Apart from the learnings from Japan, there was a tsunami in Indonesia in 2004. 11 March. No, that was Fukushima. But are we incorporating any learnings from that? Because in that tsunami was even more serious than the Japanese one.
Through the chair, yes, Mayor Luco, we take lessons from New Zealand, take lessons from all these events around the world. Genius Science will lead a lot of the research and that kind of thing, but the practitioners also learn from those and implement them. So each time there is one, we do draw on international learnings.
And can I just have a follow-up? I've mentioned this before, but quite a few times actually. You've got a graphic on page 106 that contains all the natural hazards mostly, if you include pandemics in it, because whether that's natural or man-made still is open to debate. But the one that's not on there is the probability or of a nuclear exchange occurring in the northern hemisphere, either in Europe or around the Pacific Rim. And the probability of that occurring, if you ask me, is a lot higher than the tsunami. And yet it's conspicuous, all the planning, any discussion is conspicuous by its absence here. I've asked about this previously and it sort of gets fobbed off. I'm not sure whose jurisdiction it comes under, but we should be doing some, planning, scenario modelling and all the rest of it. Surely that's being done by somebody. Do we have any, is there any insight on that?
So I think my
Because
understanding
I think it's a real thing. It's not I'm not being funny.
my understanding it would be nationally led, but perhaps Carl or Clinton can.
Yeah, through the chair, I think this is probably the question better posed to our National Emergency Management Agency representative, because any nuclear threat would be a countrywide threat. So I invite Ian. Ian, did you have anything you wanted to contribute to that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. This would actually, you're quite correct, would be led at the national level, and it'd be led by the New Zealand Defence Force that have the lead in this aspect, and obviously at the Hazard and Risk Board at a national level. I can't comment fully on it, but that would be where it would sit. I can find out some more information if you require.
Yeah, well, I think at a previous meeting there was already an undertaking to come back with some information, and I don't think we've had it. So
Yeah.
Could we have some follow through so that at least I can understand what we're doing, if anything, or we're just sort of ignoring it and hoping it doesn't happen?
I can do that. I can say also, though, under our new catastrophic planning, we're moving away from, I guess, events, and we're looking at the actual outcome of these events. And under that, obviously, health would pick up the radiation fallout, MB would pick up the emergency food supplies. So those issues are being addressed, and we're probably focusing more down that line. So I can probably provide advice in that area.
Yeah, I mean, it goes beyond that. I mean, supply chains being broken, maintaining an electrical system if you can't get stuff from overseas. I mean, the consequences are very widespread. Transport, everything's affected. But anyway, I'll leave it there. But if you could get back to me with some sort of specific information on what's actually going on in this country with regards to planning for a potential nuclear exchange, that would be nice.
Yeah,
Thank
no
you,
problem.
Mayor Luca. I think we, if we note that as an action point, then I'm sure we can get that back to you.
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions on the plan? No. Okay. So there's 4 recommendations there. I would like to add a 5th one, just to pick up a few minor typos and stuff. So that would delegate Director of the Emergency Management Bay of Plenty to make minor editorial amendments as necessary. So with those 5 recommendations, could I call for a mover and seconder for those, please? Mayor Tapsell, I shall second that. Is there any debate? No? In which case I shall put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you. Moving on to page 161, item 7.5, and it's the delegations manual. Clinton.
Thank you, Chair. The delegations manual is a new document for this group. Just to put it in context, the CDM group through the Act does get tasked by legislation to undertake certain functions and roles and responsibilities, but it also has the authority to delegate those out. Generally, those in the past have been delegated to some extent through the group plans. But what we've looked at as we discussed in our approach to our group plan is to pull out the operational sort of management stuff and then have those as separate documents. So the delegations manual is going to follow similar to what our council's delegation manual is, in other words, allowing for foster and hopefully more efficient decision-making and approval processes. And this committee in itself over the years has indicated to me they want to be less in the operational detail and more focused on the strategic and the governance. So this delegation manual is presented for this committee to consider. Cara will speak to it shortly, but she's done a lot of work working with legal and the regional council, who's our administrating authority on this delegations. So I'll hand to Cara. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. So as Clinton detailed, the way the Civil Defence Emergency Management Act is set up is that all roles and responsibilities for CDEM land directly with the Civil Defence Emergency Management Group, so this committee. So it's section 17 of the Civil Defence Emergency Management Act, and I do have some copies of that section if anyone is interested. But essentially what it does is it provides a number of roles and responsibilities to this committee and each of the members. And so that's a collection together. It's not separated out into 2 parts. When we talk about the bill in the later session, I'll talk through how that's looking to change over time. But at this current point, all roles and responsibilities are collected together. And what that means is that this committee has a number of functions, such as, responding to emergencies or respond to and manage the adverse effects of emergencies in its area that obviously aren't undertaken directly by this committee. Those are delegated out to the likes of the group controller in order to undertake those. So what we've done is we've picked the key roles and responsibilities that sit within section 17 and section 86, which is another set of powers that fall to this committee. And we've gone through the process of going, where do those practically fit? As Clinton said, a lot of this is what's already set in the previous group plan, or the current group plan, should I say, because it is still live. And there are some additional things that kind of clarify how we actually do business. One of the things that I've talked about closely with both the coordinating executive group and the general managers of councils is that this document is not intended to change how we do things at the moment. It is meant to solidify or formalise how we do things, particularly the things that are needed to pull from the current group plan and will now fit in this manual. So from a structural perspective, what we've done is we've got that front end that talks to this committee, its roles and functions, and its ability to delegate under section 18 any of its responsibilities to any person, group that this committee deems appropriate. So that's what this delegation manual is doing. It is your delegations as a committee to whomever you deem appropriate. And it's one of the reasons the way the paper is set up is with a accept with changes, or ask us to go back and do additional work, because it is your delegations manual. It's not something that's kind of gone up through all of the committees as they often would, because it is your document. What it then does is it talks through the role of the coordinating executive group. We have not added any additional delegations to the coordinating executive group within this delegations manual. You'll see that in the grey box on page 6. The administrating authority, so that's Bay of Plenty Regional Council, and no additional delegations have been added to the Bay of Plenty Regional Council as administrating authority under this. Then we move into the roles where there are some more formal delegations. So the Director of Emergency Management, that's Clinton's role. It is worth just noting that there is also a Director of Emergency Management role under the CEDM Act. That's separate, that's a national appointment. So this delegation here is for the role that Clinton currently sits in. So a number of the functions of this group under Section 17 of the CEDM group are would, if this manual is accepted and approved, would be delegated down to Clinton from this committee. And it's things that Clinton and our team at MBOP already do on behalf of this committee, such as identifying hazards and managing those hazards, consulting and communicating risks, promoting civil defence emergency management, engaging with NEMA and the like. It then moves into delegations to group and local controllers. So the first part of those is, the delegation that is for the chairperson of the Joint Committee to appoint a group controller within an emergency situation. So the process we've just gone through here to appoint Chris Brewer is obviously a formal process that takes time. We need to pull the whole committee together. So the intent of this is to enable the chairperson, in consultation with at least 2 members of the group, to appoint a group controller within an emergency situation. And we've put a caveat on that for you and of course you're welcome to change it, around not being able to bring the committee together within 4 hours. So just a bit of a test. If we need to urgently appoint a new group controller, we can do that reasonably quickly.
Cara, can I just clarify, because that wasn't entirely clear to me. So would the intention be that if such a move was necessary, that we would try to convene, presumably over Zoom, a meeting within 4 hours of the whole joint committee, and if that wasn't possible, which sounds quite ambitious to me, but anyway, that the chair would then phone up, consult with 2 others, and that would be fine. But you'd try to convene a meeting first. Is that the intention?
Yes, that was the intent.
Right.
And we can rephrase that to make that intent slightly clearer, if that would be helpful.
I think it might be, actually. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. And if this committee has any other restrictions or caveats it would like to put, or criteria it would like to put on that delegation, it is welcome to do so.
Yeah, and I think I would also say that comes in the recovery manager as well, doesn't it? So I think if we change one, then the other one ought to reflect that as well.
Absolutely. So just one thing to note in addition to that power is the group controllers and local group controllers do have the ability to delegate responsibilities to individuals if we're in a situation where we need to do that rapidly. So I, for example, could ask Stace to undertake certain functions for me within an emergency. So there is a structure within the CEDM framework that gives us a little bit of flexibility in those short notice situations as well. So that then leads us to page 12 and the functions that we are recommending get delegated to group and local controllers. These are also a number of functions that sit in under Section 17, but also Section 85. So for context for you, Section 17 are those overarching roles and responsibilities, and Section 85 are the powers that this committee holds. Those powers are currently delegated under the group plan to group controllers, so this is not an additional powers delegation for those Section 85 components there. And essentially what this would give the authority to do is for group controllers and local controllers to respond to and manage emergency events on this committee's behalf and utilise this committee's powers as detailed in the bottom half of that section, to undertake those responses. The one additional component we've added to here that wasn't in previous delegations is the Section 76 delegation, that power to require information. So that's not a power that the Joint Committee has previously delegated to group controllers, but the proposal is that it would give us the ability to draw down on information more easily, both before and during an emergency if we needed to do so. So for example, if we needed to draw down information from a private company around, outages that can sometimes be hard to do due to Privacy Act concerns, it would give us that legal authority to do that within an emergency event. So that's controllers. As the chair rightly pointed out, the group recovery managers we've also added that appointment process to the group recovery managers as well. And so that's that section 29.4 delegation. And a much shorter set of delegations in terms of powers on page 14. The reason that's shorter is a quirk of the CEDAM Act, where the controller powers, the emergency response powers fall to the Joint Committee and can then be delegated down, but recovery manager, those powers are provided to the recovery manager directly. So those equivalent of that Section 85 powers that we were talking about before for controllers do exist for recovery managers. They're just provided directly rather than through the committee in a quirk of legislation. So it's a very similar arrangement for recovery as controller. We then move out of those structural act delegations into the financial delegations component and more of those operational enabling delegations. So the director components reflect the current arrangements within Bay Plenty Regional Council, where Clinton's role of director does have that financial delegation in existence, and the process whereby under those financial structures, Clinton is able to sub-delegate that down to his group controllers or another individual for another purpose. And so that's what you're seeing in that control or that group controllers section here. Obviously, the local controllers is slightly different because those are council appointed positions, and that local controllers delegation of 100,000 reflects a KEG decision from a number of years ago, a coordinating executive group decision from a number of years ago, where that delegation of 100,000 was established at that point. So it's formalising that within here. And then the same structure for recovery managers and the ability to enable group recovery managers with that 200,000 delegation as well, and local recovery managers with that 100,000, with the intent that it will enable recovery managers to kickstart those their recovery processes nice and early and provide that delegation directly. Now, we understand that there will be other council arrangements that sit in behind both of these delegations, and it's anticipated that there will be some form of reporting up to chief financial officers or chief executives or the like, but we haven't detailed those in here because obviously those will be different depending on the council and depending on the chief executive's preferences for how those finances are reported up the chain. So hence we haven't detailed those in here. Tauranga City is likely to have a different structure to a Portakey, we can imagine. And last is a set of administrative authorisations that essentially reflect how we do things in terms of the approval of those strategic plans through this committee, supporting plans through the coordinating executive group, and the operational documents through our lead. So Mark Crow as group controller, or our recovery manager, currently Julian Verity. So that's what the intent of these operational delegations are. And then very formally at the end, terms of reference, who gets to approve those. So that's my very brief summary of this manual. As I mentioned at the very start, it's not expected to change how we do things. It's about formalising current arrangements and now filling gaps as we've removed some components out of the group plan. But it is your delegations manual, so we seek your direction on any changes, amendments that you would like made. In terms of timeframes, There is no requirement to sign this off this committee meeting, but we would look to have it signed off at the next committee meeting if possible. And if that's not possible, we'd make an amendment to the group plan just to add a couple of delegations back into there, just so we didn't end up with a gap, as we're expecting to sign off the group plan at that next joint committee meeting in December. Thank you.
Thank you, Cara. I would hope we've better sign it off today, but let's open it up to questions. Commissioner Wasley.
Thanks, Chair. I'm on agenda page 174. It talks about the group and local controllers, and it's about the authority to replace group controller during a state of emergency. I'm just wondering what would be achieved by putting the full CDM group there, and what would be wrong with just the chairperson in consultation with 2 members of the group making the appointment? It just seems to be adding to more process at a time when it's probably not needed.
So that touches on the point that I made about would the intention be to try to convene a meeting within 4 hours, and then you sort of wait 4 hours, I guess, and find you can't, and then you have the consultation. So, what do other members think? Do you think that's a unnecessary burden on what would be a very difficult time, I imagine?
Just yet? Okay. Chair, through you, when it comes to the balloon going up, time is of an essence, I believe, and I think it's something that the responsibility of the chair and a couple of group members is a hell of a lot. It just makes the whole thing a lot seamless. Now, one thing that does concern me though is those controllers are under a whole lot of pressure, and is there a time frame for them to be stood down and refreshed? That's one thing because we've had that in the Edgecombe situation, and that wasn't even right at the doorstep. It was out in our Rohi and Kawerau. People were starting to get tired and grumpy and making a few decisions that perhaps they shouldn't be doing. So it's just one other thing that I've brought up too.
That I'm sure that would be an operational decision between the controller and his alternate, wouldn't it?
But it's just something that if they've got to be replaced, do they have to go back to the chair and those members again? That's all.
Thank you, Chair. I think my understanding of this section of the Act, just for clarity, is we appoint a group controller, as we have Mark Crowe. He's the lead, so he's accountable. We also appoint a number of alternates, and we are free to appoint it, and that's why Chris has come on. And we already have Matt Harricks and Cara. So the ideally is that's your rotation. This part of this Act was intended if your lead controller who gets all your delegations for some reason needed to be replaced. So it's not actually trying to appoint a whole lot of new ones. It's for some, and I've not heard of it being done anyway, but it's if we found that if I was a lead controller and suddenly confidence was lost in me, then this committee has the power to go, actually, Clinton, you need to stand down, and you take one of the alternates, for example, and you say, right, you now our lead. So it gives this committee the thing to basically, because you appoint the original one, lead, it's about just replacing that lead. It's not about if Mark needed a rest and Cara standing in, that's all covered operationally. So it's for that unique circumstance where you would, in my view, have lost confidence. Or if, for example, if the lead controller decided, time out, I'm out of here, resignation, gone, then you had to replace that person. So it's a very unique circumstance.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I agree with Clinton. It's a very unusual circumstance. In my career, it's only been used once. The lead controller actually worked himself to the bone and didn't realise that was required, and we had to step him aside. It is more a health and safety issue. Can I also recommend you taking some advice before you go back to saying just the joint chair can do this? The Act says the group may, and that's all of you. It doesn't say the joint committee or anyone else outside it, so you may have issues, and I'd take legal advice on that.
I can check that with legal. Sorry, through the chair.
Yeah, please, yeah, go on.
I can cross that through legal if you'd like me to. The advice we've had from legal so far has been the framing of Section 18 of the CEDAM Act, which talks to the ability to delegate any of the group's functions, does cover our ability to delegate the likes of this out if we choose to, or if this committee chooses to, shall I say.
Thank you. Mayor Tapsell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I was just going to come back to that point on whether we needed a formal amendment to that. I would certainly support that direction. I note Kara's comments, but also note that we want this signed off as soon as possible. But yeah, I'll support that. And then I do have a question as well.
Please go for it. Yeah.
Thank you. It was just on page 180 of the agenda, I think it's page 29 of the manual, just around if there is an immediate risk, quote, to life, if there's immediate risk to life, group controllers have an unlimited financial delegation. Just a question on how long that unlimited financial delegation lasts for. Is that an immediate, I need to get supplies to people right now, or is it I'm going to make a decision that will last a few months and the cost of that will last a few months? Just trying to get an understanding of what unlimited means, but also appreciating that, yes, we would want them to make any decision that they're required to at the time.
Through the chair. The intent around that was the first of your questions, around 2 o'clock in the morning, we need to do something very rapidly to make a short notice decision in order to save lives. So it was not around committing an organisation to 2 months worth of expenditure or the like, but we can frame some wording around that if that would put this committee's mind to rest around kind of restricting that down a little bit. We have sought advice from other CEDAM groups. This is a delegation that has existed in other groups before, and it is one that we also spoke to Regional Council Finance about as well, and it's something that they were comfortable with in terms of the structure, though it did a little bit of, oh yes, okay, and then the thinking through process that you did, it was definitely seen as something that was able to be done from a financial delegations perspective.
Any other questions? No? Okay, so we have three recommendations there. So I'm going to suggest that we go recommendation 1, 2B, which then takes account of removing that need to convene or try to convene a full joint committee.
Yep.
Subject to legal advice confirming that that is okay. And then recommendation 3 as well.
Can I just ask one question, just for clarification? That removal of the 4-hour requirement is both for the appointment and the rescindment process. So you'd like the removal from the appointment and an additional reflection of rescindment.
And it would be for both the group controller and the recovery manager as well.
Perfect. Just wanted that clarification. Thank you.
Okay. So in which case, for those recommendations, I'll look for a mover and seconder. Commissioner Worsley, seconder Mayor Tapsell. Thank you. Is there any debate on that? No? Okay, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. So moving to page 184, we have the Regional Safety and Rescue Services Fund Review and the Coordinating Executive Group recommendations. Ruben.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everybody. As the Chairman has said, you have a report on page 184 of your agenda, which is seeking your endorsement of a key recommendation back to the Regional Council around the quantum of the Regional Safety and Rescue Services Fund Review. I don't have anything to add to the report, but happy to take feedback or answer questions.
Any questions for Ruben? I did have one for you, Ruben, and there was, I couldn't recall, actually maybe Commissioner Worsley can answer this, but why was Tauranga City separated from the rest of the region in this, in terms of funding?
My understanding, Mr. Chairman, is that Tauranga City had an existing relationship with the surf rescue operation in Tauranga, when this fund was introduced, and so that's carried on.
Any more questions? No? Okay, so we have two recommendations there. Basically, that's to increase the budget in line with catch up with inflation. So moving seconder, Mayor Luca and Mayor Tapsell. Any debate? All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Moving on to page 193, report number 7.7, and that is the Bay of Plenty New Zealand Response Team's Directed Gap Analysis and Business Case. Clinton.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'll take the report as read. I'll just highlight to set the scene for the New Zealand response teams. These are volunteer teams around New Zealand that are involved in response for civil defence, directly to civil defence. Emergency management. They are currently now being audited and signed off by the National Emergency Management Agency with multi-agency support. And over the years, we've had a shift from the 1980s when teams started being formed into 2002 Act. And then recently we saw that in the Bay of Plenty, we had 3 teams, one in Tauranga, one in Rotorua, one in Whakatane. The Whakatane and Rotorua teams have ended up closing down, and the Tauranga team has been struggling to raise funding and to be supported. We've also noted around the country some changes. Waikato, for example, had 1 team in Taupo. That team also, the local council had decided it's no longer going to be supporting that functionality. There was a lot of tension at the time around, is it our function or is it the fire and emergency services function? So it's been agreed nationally that New Zealand response teams will exist. The Kone Executive Group directed MBOB to go and do a gap analysis and do some work on the future of the teams, and that's the report presented to you today. So the Kone Executive Group have endorsed that the way forward is to support the Tauranga team to become, and this are the words I'll use, a regional team. So while based out, it will service, so we don't, instead of establishing 3 teams, we have 1 team that services the region. And there's a cost analysis breakdown there as well, which we'll be working through. One of the main things is finding support base for this team to house themselves, as they currently are just using a container in the parking lot of the St. John ambulance base. So we really need to support this team to bring it up to functionality. And in the recent weather events, we've seen around the country how these teams have proven themselves. They don't do the fire services job. I just want to clarify that that's the fire service job of rescue, but they perform that support service. They perform a lot of additional services directly that a group or local controller can task. And that's things like door knocking, making sure people are out of areas. They can go in after weather events and help people move water damaged stuff out of houses into. So it's that sort of, and they get trained up to do those kind of things. So this report is seeking endorsement and approval from this committee to pursue us establishing the New Zealand Response Team in Tauranga, known as New Zealand Response Team number 16, and that we work to secure them a base of operations and support them in terms of becoming operational and providing a service to the Bay of Plenty. I do note that we are in partnership with Waikato. They're doing the same, so they're analysing what they need, and the reason we are is we can share resource, but then their team can back up our team, and our team will back up their team. So there's going to be a cross-border support as well. In terms of that. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Clinton. I'll kick off with one question. So when I first read this, I'm aware we have community response teams, and I'm just wondering how do they interact or mesh alongside the New Zealand response team, which is a local group, localish group as well. How do they work alongside?
Yes, they can work closely. The community response team's concept is it's at the ground roots, grass level of community members coming together. They get obviously whatever support and training, and they'll link direct to the EOC focused on their community. So if you're a community response team in Te Puke, for example, the idea is they look after each other in Te Puke. The New Zealand response teams is a level higher where they get much more training, and some of the training, depending on what function they're going to do in their region, for example, mass casualty support, that's supporting St. John's Ambulance if they have to set up a mass casualty event. They get trained by St. John's, and they get signed off by St. John's. But they then become a deployable asset. So that's sort of a higher functional level team that can be sent out and support. And Edgecombe Floods, we saw that. We saw the 3 teams in the Bay of Plenty at the time supporting. We saw teams coming from the other regions. So it's at much higher level, and they get audited and signed off by the national agency.
Thank you, Clinton. Any other questions? Commissioner Worsley.
Clinton, it was just around, I don't have any problem with the proposal. Have there been any initial discussions with the airport manager in terms of the proposition at this point, or were you waiting for consideration by the group?
Through the chair, thank you, Commissioner. No, we're already in discussions, and we're in multi-agency discussions. So it's us with the airport manager, but also Fire and Emergency New Zealand are involved in that, because we are looking at options where we can be more efficient and share. So yes, discussions are already underway.
I'm pleased to hear that, because there are, well, plans, I think construction might be underway in terms of the fire engine base and all that type of thing.
Are there any more questions for Clinton? No? Okay, so we'll, 5 recommendations there. Can I have a mover and seconder for those, please? Councillor Campbell, Mayor Luca. Any debate? There being none, I shall put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Okay, item 7.8 on page 227. Emergency Management Bay of Plenty Workforce Planning. Clinton.
Thank you, Chair. Again, taken as read, I just wanted to highlight the purpose of this workforce planning is that over the years, I have managed the workforce and any increases through the existing budget that this group provides to the Group Emergency Management Office. However, it's come time where I'm feeling that we critically need some new roles and that these will be pushing me outside my budget envelope. So obviously seeking an increase in budget to align to this. And the roles that I outlined there are being critically identified as supporting us to future-proof us for the new bill and the new national plan that we already know is coming, and additional workloads, as well as what we've seen in recent times in terms of, and there's been commentary around controllers getting tired, but I would argue, and you'll hear shortly about that a bit further in the next presentation, the emergency managed workforce is very thin. And the more and more these events are coming, the longer hours, the more pressure. And I'll be quite frank, everyone knows I was off for a while, and that's because I needed a break. That's because I wasn't realizing how tired I was. And it's not just me, it's my team, it's your teams as well that need this break. So this report basically identifies 3 key roles that I'm proposing to be established, for which I'm seeking additional funding. And that's a principal advisor in the cultural engagement space, focusing on the work going forward that the new bill is bringing on us from a point of view of working with Maori, but not just Maori, it's wider than Maori, it's Pacific, it's all the other cultural ethnicities, and to serve as an advisor to not just myself, but to the key roles like group controller, group recovery manager in their fields, and to this committee, the chairs of this committee and KEG as well. The second role is advisor communications, and Lisa is here with us today. She's our senior communications advisor. Lisa was the first ever full-time communications advisor that we established, because before we relied on councils, and I think it's proven its value over this time. Lisa's done an outstanding job leading this, but I'm equally concerned one person cannot hold it together. So, to be frank, while I'd like a lot more comms advisors, I'm also realistic, and we are asking for one additional comms advisor role that we can assign to Lisa, so we have redundancy. When Lisa's on leave or taking her break, I have a dedicated emergency comms person as backup. So we have that redundancy. And the third one role we put in there links to the previous report, which is around a shared resource with Waikato to look off, to manage the New Zealand response teams. That one is not as urgent because we'll be waiting for Waikato deliberations to see how we align. In the interim, the operations team in Emergency Management Bay of Plenty, and I'm glancing at him in the corner there, Bruce, is overseeing our team at the moment to support them. as we work through this, what it will look like in more detail going forward. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Clinton. Any questions about the those new roles or the workforce planning in general? Melika.
Just for curiosity, how did you establish what grade would go for each of these roles? Is that sort of a standard process in the public service scale, or how does that work?
It's through the regional council as the administrating authority. So we would identify a role, we draw up a job description, what we expect that role to do. That would be sent to the regional council, people and capability team, who would then job size it against the regional council's structure and network. And then that would come back with the sizing for that role.
Mayor Tapsell.
Thank you. I just wanted to agree that the demands of the legislation are better addressed through a group resource as well. And also that I was pleased to see some support around a cultural advisor. As we have seen in other cases, often when there is an emergency, it's not just the schools, but it's also the marae that people go to. We have a substantial amount of marae, I know certainly in the Rotorua district, but around the Bay of Plenty region as well. And so I think that would be a fantastic way to have a dedicated person who can also form those relationships with iwi Māori as well. So I was quite pleased to see that and do support further capability and capacity being brought into this team.
Thank you. Clinton.
Thank you, Mayor Tapsell. And just to add to that, you reminded me, I just want to acknowledge that this report only focuses on the Emergency Management Bay of Plenty team as the group funded office. Local level, obviously, will look at their own functionality, and I just want to acknowledge recent developments with Western Bay adding a further community resilience advisor into their team, and Whakatane Council also looking to add in an additional team member. So I'm really encouraged by that local delivery also matching, remembering our role is to support the local delivery, so to help coordinate across and help drive that with the expertise and function. So it's a team effort, so thank you very much.
Thank you. So with that, I can't see any more questions, so we've got 6 recommendations. Can I have a mover and seconder for those, please? Mayor Tapsell, I'll second it. Any further debate on that? There being none, I shall put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Now, next item 7.9, you'll be aware is distributed under separate cover. So I'll just give you a moment to change your agendas or bits of paper. And we'll go and introduce, Clinton, why don't you introduce Jane?
Thank you, Chair. I feel like Jane doesn't need introductions, but I will officially. A lot of members will remember Jane Rowland, who used to be with the National Emergency Management Agency and assigned to the Bay of Plenty and worked closely with us for many, many years. Jane is now out in private consultancy, Simplicity, and when we had a response to Cyclone Gabrielle, and just to emphasize not just that, but we had preceding events as well. As up and down the country we've seen reviews being done, we engaged Jane to review the Bay of Plenty response. So what Jane is here to present to you today is her findings on our response and to give us the true of what we saw.
Yeah,
Thanks,
sure,
Jane.
Koto. Thank you. Thank you for asking me to come and talk to you today. Rather than go through the report, because you've got a copy of that, there's a couple of things I thought I might do for you today. One is to give you a little bit of an overview of some of the findings that we observed, but then also to contextualise that within the national inquiry that's about to start, because I understand part of that process may involve coming and interviewing some of you. So we thought it might be helpful for you to have a bit of a sense of how you performed during Cyclone Gabrielle and how that might line up with the terms of reference of the national inquiry. Would it be okay to go to the next slide, or do I have it? Oh, there we go. So I'll give you a little bit of a contextual information around your response to Cyclone Gabrielle. I'll also talk to you a little bit about some of the strengths and innovations and areas for improvement. And then I'll give you a little bit of an overview of the government inquiry into the response to the North Island severe weather event and what it's actually looking at. And then I'll give you some key messages to consider if you are engaged as part of that review process. So just a little bit of context for you. Yes, we focused on Cyclone Gabriel because that's where most, the declarations were. But I do just want to acknowledge that the Bay of Plenty has had quite a challenging first part. I was going to say the first part of the year, but we're September now and it's still going for you guys. So we considered Cyclone Hale, and we also considered the impacts from the January severe weather event. But during the course of the interviews, we also talked to particularly to Kaldale around their impact from the earthquake swarm, but then also during the interviews there were 2 subsequent weather events each time we came to the Bay of Plenty, so I'm very sorry about that. Impact-wise, during Cyclone Gabriel, you had 4 states of local emergency, including the Group 1. There was also a national state of emergency declared during that time, and the Bay of Plenty issued 2 emergency mobile alerts within the Western Bay of Plenty. As part of our review, we were fortunate to have conversations with 83 people from the Bay of Plenty, and we looked at 27 documents that you guys have produced and stuff that have been produced nationally. And we generated the report that's in your agenda that's got 19 recommendations in it, but I just want to highlight the fact that most of those recommendations are operational, and I just wanted you to know that. I just also want to give you a bit of a sense of some of the key findings. The real big ticket takeaways for you are, firstly, you have a policy that tells you when you will do a review, and that's quite rare. And you're very clear about the fact that when you get to the sort of emergency that has a local declaration, that you will do that independently. And I think you should acknowledge that, because that's actually quite unusual. So you've got a real sense of clarity about when you do reviews and how you go about doing them. I think another thing that's a real takeaway from the interviews is that whilst there were impacts in the Bay of Plenty, let's be really clear about that, many of the interviewees were really clear about the fact that that wasn't as serious as it had been. And more than one person said to us that, it could have been worse. So for that emergency, I just want you to know that when we identified recommendations that you might think about as corrective actions, it wasn't about necessarily improving the performance of that response. It's about ones that will come in the future. You should know that your statutory processes for declaring states of local emergency were all compliant with the Act. And I think that's probably a good one for you to know too. For each of the EOCs, whether they declared or not, their primary consideration was for community. And I think you should note that as well, that your emergency management arrangements are very clear about why they're doing what they're doing, and it's about supporting your communities. Another one, I think you've kind of touched on it as well, is that these cumulative and ongoing weather events have had a massive impact on staff wellbeing, particularly within the emergency management professionals, because they're the ones that stand up first and they're the ones that are still doing it at the end. Yes, you've got surge capacity and you use it well, but it's the emergency management professionals that feel the pinch the most. I feel like for this particular cyclone, you did okay, but people were tired. But I think you should know that that risk exists. And for future emergencies, whether it's cumulative, bigger or longer, it's a problem. And I think it's really, really insightful of you to consider those 3 additional appointments. I think they'll go a long way to supporting the existing teams. There are some key capacity gaps that you have in key roles and in response functions, and it puts more pressure on those emergency management professionals, because when you've got those gaps, it's the same people you're using over and over again. But I also feel like you need to know, again, for this emergency, it didn't eventuate in anything negative, but I think it's something you should know for the future. But it's not just your problem, it's a sector-wide problem. And I think people who have been through several rounds of emergencies make an active choice to leave emergency management. So the more you can do to support your existing staff, the better. I think you should also know, like I said before, the 19 recommendations have been agreed by KEG to be rolled into your normal operational work planning, so there's nothing significant. And as I said, these recommendations were not material for Cyclone Gabriel, but they could be in the future for a longer duration or more cumulative or a more significant emergency. So I'll give you a little bit of a whistle stop on some of the strengths and innovations and areas for improvement. That's, I say, improvement underneath Ian's head. So some really great strengths. One of the things the Bay of Plenty did well was it leveraged its modelling, that you had some existing modelling around coastal inundation, that the regional council teams plugged in the variables for Cyclone Gabriel into and generated inundation maps, which hadn't been done before. And it meant that local controllers had information to make good decisions early. Was it a bit of a wonky table? Yes. But did it do its job? Yes. And I think that one of the recommendations we made was keep doing that and keep refining your models. And a really good example was that for the Bay of Plenty, particularly, you've done this before with Edgecombe, and you understand now when rainfall variables give you worries because you've done that modelling and you know what to do. And so what we're saying is for future events where inundation's the risk rather than overland flow, that approach that you took to generate those models to help inform early declarations is a good one. Again, your PIM, I think you've mentioned that before, public information management was outstanding, and community really felt that the regular updates that were being provided through social media helped manage the stress that they were feeling because of that uncertainty. And congratulations on agreeing to support further capacity in the PIM space. The community-led response was also outstanding. You'd have different approaches for different parts of the Bay of Plenty, and that's perfectly okay. Some places it's Marai, some places it's community response teams, but the relationships that you had pre-established with iwi and Marai and the East Coast, particularly because that's where the impacts were, did lead to very early choices around establishing community facilities. And those relationships, again, I don't want to single Opotiki out, but the choice that they made to engage with their local iwi and provide that certainty for Marai around cost recovery in those early hours meant that it's a lot easier to have that conversation when you've got that certainty in place. Again, in the innovation space, the inundation mapping, I've covered that off. That was outstanding. And using it to inform local community messaging as well. So not only just informing your decision making and what you want to stand up in the community, but actually having something to tell your community as well is really good. And that connection with iwi and having those predefined or pre-agreed financial support really does help to expedite community support. Another thing that we observed from the interviews is that regardless of the fact that you didn't need it, you went through a process of developing recovery transition planning, which is a really good kind of position statement, for want of a better word. Even if you don't necessarily need to go into recovery, it consolidates what you know the impacts are. And it's a really good practice. It's kind of like a nice full stop at the end of your response audit trail, if you know what I mean. Areas for improvement. So a number of the governance entities that we spoke to, that wasn't just the mayors, that was the Bay of Plenty Collective Impact Group as well, did say that the ongoing support and training that you can receive really helps you to do your job well. And so that was considered to be something you should continue to do, and including the Bay of Plenty Collective Impact Group as well, which has got those central government agencies in. So it just means that they've got that kind of better understanding of how to play their part in emergencies as well. Having clearer defined triggers and thresholds to help inform response arrangements that are fit for purpose at a local and regional level. And there's been a bit of churn in the Bay of Plenty staffing over the years, but you have a partnership agreement that outlines those roles and responsibilities, which is pretty unique, and that we just recommended that you remind yourself of that and help share that with staff. And I think the item on the agenda today around your delegations, again, just cements the fact that you do know your roles and responsibilities. I think on a bad day, sometimes it's not the first thing you think of. You've got capacity gaps. You've got capacity gaps in controllers, in PIMs and recovery managers. And as I said, that wasn't a problem for Cyclone Gabriel, but it could be in the future. So again, I just wanted to kind of highlight that. And I think there was a suite of recommendations that were really around helping you have better response operations. And I think one of the takeaways of doing a review at all is because you can always do things better. And we just were able to highlight a few operational areas that could benefit from a bit of a zhuzh, particularly around things like information flow and systems and processes, all the boring stuff. Another improvement area was about being able to proactively engage with central government partners, because there was definitely a theme out of the review that there wasn't a really clear shared understanding about what it is that central government partners bring to the table in a response and when they bring it. And I know that that's been rolled into work programming as well. So that's pretty much a whistle stop on the review findings. But now I thought it might be helpful for me just to talk to you a little bit about what I understand the government review into Cyclone Gabriel, or it's actually the North Island severe weather events, because I think it's going to wrap up all of the events that happened at the beginning of the year. So firstly, it's going to consider agency and CDM group reviews. So it's likely to consider the review report that we've presented for you. I think that'll be an input into that review. We'll also consider the better responses to natural disasters and other emergencies in New Zealand review that was done in 2017, which was what informed the bill that's sitting in Parliament now for the emergency management bill. It'll also look at other reviews of other responses that have happened that make sense to do so. And so there's a bunch of backcasting stuff that they'll be looking at, as well as what actually happened during the North Island severe weather events. The scope of the inquiry is to identify lessons from the response to and readiness activities ahead of the North Island severe weather events, and they will make recommendations that should be applied in the preparation for future emergency events. And what they're specifically looking at are the legislative, regulatory and operational settings and the implementation and execution of those settings. So what that means is what's working now, based on what we've got, what's working and what's not working. And they're going to dig into 6 key areas. One is around roles and responsibilities, which includes decision-making and coordination and collaboration between local, regional and national arrangements, and the role of Māori, iwi and community organisations as part of that. They'll look at the funding settings and whether or not they're fit for purpose and clear across all government portfolios. And in order that they can care for impacted people and take precautions to reduce imminent danger or reduce the consequences. They'll look at immediate response management, so things like public warnings, information into community, information available for decision makers, that basically protects the public and responder safety. They'll look at the supply of goods and services, and that includes shelter, lifelines, and other necessary central government and local government support services. It will look at communication and engagement in terms of how do you share enough information to the public to allow them to prepare for an emergency, but it will also include things like the meteorological and hydrological forecasts and plans and practices in emergency management that are in place. It will also look at support to disproportionately impacted people and the coordination and provision of response services to those people. So what I thought might be useful is for me to give you a bit of a whistle stop on how you during Cyclone Gabriel performed under each of those headings, like those sorts of things that would be good key messages for you to share if you are part of an interview process. So under the roles and responsibilities piece, you have a partnership agreement which looks at across the 4 Rs, and it looks at what happens at the group level and at the local level, and that's unusual. I just think you should know that that's unusual. And so the fact that you have it, the fact that you went through the work to be able to define it is unusual, but you have had a lot of new staff, so there's an opportunity to remind staff of its existence and to kind of use it as a foundation document for future planning. But I think one of the messages that you can share back with the panel is that you have this. And you now have a delegations manual, which at the end is kind of also quite unusual. the response roles at the EOC and ECC level performed really well, and they understood that there is an opportunity to strengthen the interoperability. So, you know, the roles and responsibilities that you have mapped for planning and the ones that you have that are mapped for response are pretty clear. It's just about being able to reinvigorate those a little bit more to help with that interoperability. But the bit that is less clear is the role of central government and what it brings to the table in an emergency and when it brings it. And so, although it might be clear in the current settings, the operationalisation of those settings is a bit more of a challenge, shall we say. In terms of funding, there are the usual funding settings that NEMA has under the national plan, under Section 33, are enabling of support to communities, but they're not directly enabling for iwi. Iwi have to come via local authorities to claim reimbursement for costs that they've incurred to support communities during a response. And from the Bay of Plenty's perspective, that's no different to anywhere else in the country. Again, the bit about the funding piece, again, that piece around what central government and how you access it is a bit unclear. It was during this response. It caused a little bit of tension for the Bay of Plenty. It caused a little bit of tension elsewhere in the country as well. In terms of the immediate response management, for you, in this instance, you've got systems and processes, but during the response to Cyclone Gabriel, a lot of that lived inside of your response leaders' heads. And that whether that's because there's only so many staff that can do things and you just haven't got time to empty your head and make sure that people understand it from a systemic perspective, I think some of it is driven a little bit by capacity. The same with, I've said about public information management, that was a strength, but capacity is the issue, but hopefully you've sorted that now. But that exists as well for controllers, and the point about wellbeing being an issue across cumulative emergencies is a challenge, and I think that's probably something that you might want to highlight if you are interviewed, is about the systemic gaps. And the emergency management alerts were used, but there's some tidy up processes that will help make sure that that's better in the future. It's not substantive, but it's something that you should be aware of. I just think it's because it's not used that much, but during this course of this year, there's been a lot of focus on the use or not use of emergency management, emergency mobile alerts, particularly following severe weather in Auckland at the beginning of the year. In terms of the supply of goods and services, the impacts in the Bay of Plenty were quite limited around lifelines. There wasn't a lot that we could add into there. I don't think there's a lot we can say as a story during Cyclone Gabriel for the Bay of Plenty. The Bay of Plenty used evacuation centres during Cyclone Gabriel rather than traditional welfare support services in a community, in a civil defence centre. And I think that did prove to be a bit challenging, and there's probably a little bit more clarity that could be provided about the sorts of support that are provided to communities in short duration events like a cyclone. I think the community level support did look different across the different local authorities, but I think the message here for you with the national inquiry is that the more you can invest in pre-existing relationships with the community, the more dividends they pay out in an emergency. And when you've got limited resource to be able to do that as part of business as usual, obviously it takes a long time to bring a whole community on board. Under the communications and engagement piece, again, the PIM messaging, use of Facebook was fantastic, but also the fact that the review is looking at meteorological and hydrological information specifically and how that informed decision making. You did a good job of that in terms of working with the regional council to be able to do that. Not all groups had that luxury. That inundation mapping really helped with early decision making. And then with the disproportionately impacted people, again, strong engagement with iwi in the east through marae and the use of koha and the early response really kind of provided some clarity and some rigor around that. There's a little bit in the terms of reference of the national review that says it'll be looking at to what extent acknowledging and acting in the support of the interests of Maori in the context of an emergency event, and to what extent it's consistent with the Treaty of Waitangi Te Tiriti. And I'm keen for you to just reflect on that for a moment in terms of how enabling current settings, legislation and operational arrangements are in being able to give effect to that. I think just to kind of conclude, oh, I didn't click that one across. Just to conclude, the inquiry recommendations are looking to make recommendations on changes to legislation, regulatory and operational settings and strategies and other measures that should apply for future emergency events. And the Bay of Plenty will have previously identified areas through engagement with the TAG review and again with any reflections on the new legislation. And so it might be prudent to kind of consider what you've already raised and to what extent the new Act is actually giving effect to that for you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jane. Do any members have questions for Jane? No? Okay. I just want to say thank you for that presentation. Okay. And I do want to say that the review document is pretty thorough, and it's good to see comments that I've made reflected, and that's always helpful. So with that, I'll look for a mover and seconder for the recommendations on page 2 of that separate document to receive the report and endorse incorporating the recommendations into the continuous improvement plan for the group. So mover Commissioner Wasley, second Mayor Tapsell. If there's no further debate, I should put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. I think with that, we should break for morning tea before we finish off the agenda and then go into workshop. Okay, I think we'll thank you. I think we'll make a start back after morning tea. Thank you, everyone. So we'll move on to Clinton's verbal update.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a very brief update because most of the content has been covered off in the main reports. So the only sort of additional aspects to add to bring to the members' attention. Just waiting for the clicker. The first one is just to bring to members' attention, our team are working on some professional development pathway for elected members. So that's come up quite often. It's come up in the reviews around the country as well around how elected members prepared for civil defence emergency management. And I remind members that in the Bay we have a process where after elections we run that seminar. We ran one in Te Puke. We invited all elected officials, which has proven quite successful. But going forward throughout, the staff have looked at this, and I just would like some initial feedback. What they are proposing is 3 sort of focus categories for future programs of training. And that's around legislative, strategic, and operational. So those sort of 3 themes of, what's the law saying, what is the strategic outlook, and then what does it mean when we're actually in the response. And there's some subtopics under that. The main thing too, also staff just wanted to get an understanding of thoughts in terms of delivery. So what's the preference for example, workshop sessions, 30 to 60 minutes following this meeting? Or would we prefer online sessions led by subject matter experts, scheduled at a different time? Or would the preference be for in-person, sort of short seminars, sort of whether it's 2 hours to half a day with subject matter experts? So I'll pause there first just to get a feeling of what the preferred method would be, in terms of that. I suppose the next one also is the audience. While the Joint Committee members here and the alternates are all the appointed governance for civil defence, is that our focus, or would you like us to focus on all elected officials, in other words, across all councils? So I could allow for some comments.
Thank you, Clinton. I think I'll open it up to comments in just a moment. I think the one part depends on another part as well. So depending on who we want to involve will dictate to some extent the methodology of how we do that as well. So, but does anyone have any views on what means of delivery we want?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
So is that Deputy Mayor Emick? Sorry, who was
Yes.
that?
Hello, can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can. I can't see. There you are. I can see you now. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks, Clinton. Just in terms of you're wanting some feedback. I mean, obviously, face-to-face works best for everybody. And, the early elected members training that we had in Te Puke was great. Well, we only had 5 of our councillors, I think, they were available to attend that time. So I don't know whether that sort of overview session can be repeated at least 2 times in the first 6 months of the triennium to see if we get all elected members covered. The other suggestion is that, you know how all elected members get to do that cyber security sort of training? Those really quick little short 2-minute videos with a scenario and then some questions afterwards. I don't know if you're developing a training program, but that was really good. And I know that our councils had like 100% uptake on all the cyber security because either the program hounds you to complete it or the IT staff give you a little reminder if you haven't. So that's just an idea.
Okay. Any other views? Right. I'll tell you my thoughts for what they're worth. I mean, I feel that it should be joint committee members. I think that gives enough coverage of mayors and alternates, just in case there's some issues. I think going much wider than that is going to make it a bit more unwieldy and less personal. All elected members are invited to the initial induction, which is valuable. I don't know whether they need that more detailed training that I think we're seeking here. And I think that I agree with Leslie that in person would be better. I don't know whether we need it after a meeting when we're all a bit frazzled and if we have experts there hanging around waiting to do that, so that might not be ideal for them either. So I'm kind of going with joint committee members and the scheduled in-person sessions. But open to any comments on that. Bill, no, motion wasn't.
Certainly I support that, Chair. And what I was just going to highlight is that there will be a whole lot of new people sitting around the TCC table from end of July next year. So there might need to be some particular focus. I'm just raising it now, Clinton, in terms of bringing some of those people, whoever they are, up to speed in terms of the regional civil defence emergency management obligations. But certainly I think in terms of that interest, and just speaking on behalf of the 4 commissioners, obviously Anne's as chair is the main representative here, and then myself. The interest probably doesn't go as wide to everyone else, so that's why that targeted thing I think is quite good.
Awesome.
Yeah, Chair. Look, I have a different view on this, and I tend to agree with Deputy Mayor Emick. For all the years I've been around the table here, I'm quite aghast the amount of local elected members that have absolutely no idea about civil defence, and they really should do. It shouldn't just be up to the poor old mayor and the deputy mayor to cop it whenever they, but that is it's something that's really, I think, is wanting, particularly now with the landscape that it is, and especially around the coastal areas. But some of the average councillors wouldn't have a clue what the hell is going on. That sort of concerns me. So I think that training thing that we did in Te Puke was good. But it really is up to the local councils to make sure they get a good response It is an important thing now. Once, you know, civil defence was sort of, as long as you've got a roll of toilet paper in your bag and all the rest of it, you're all kapai. But those days are gone, I'm sorry. And you know, it is, you know, it's a serious business. And it is a costly business. And it can cost the individuals very, very dearly if we're not prepared. So that's just my look on it anyway.
Thank you, Malcolm. Mayor Moore and then Ian Wilson.
Yeah, hey, sorry for not being in person today. I have a small team and I've got another meeting I've got to go to shortly. Look, I hear what Deputy Mayor Mink is saying, and also, yeah, look, I think the meeting in Te Puke was excellent, and we had a chance to get everyone there that needed to be there. Trying to get everyone to do everything, it's rather difficult. I have to chase my own team up. It's a small team, but they never do their cyber security, which is really important. So, look, I think it's up to the mayors to chase up their, you know, keep their. This is my personal thing. I keep them all informed and what they need to be looking at. But I'd have to agree with you, James, through the chair. Like, yeah, I'm happy with the group as it is, and in person is excellent. And I'm sorry not for being there today.
Thank you, Mayor Moore. And I think we would all agree that as mayors, encouraging all our elected members to attend at least that initial induction given by Civil Defence is absolutely important, and it's a really informative and interesting event. So that is something I would certainly endorse. But I'll go to Ian Wilson at NEMA now.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Perhaps my advice would be, I would think the legislative and strategic definitely sits with you and your joint committee. However, in numerous events that we've dealt with, the operational component of your elected members tends to waver a little, and perhaps that needs to be explained to them. Actually, they do come back through the mayor and take the guidance from the mayor and inspect their own electorates. So it may need an update there, I don't know.
Thank you. Okay, is there any other questions or comments? You got sufficient direction on that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think that's been great. Thank you. We've got a direction in which we can frame up. I'll just allude to the fact that we will not do all elected officials, but their focus will be on the Joint Committee's functions, and where required, we'll produce material, even if it's to make it available for socialising out through the local authorities. I just have one more thing to highlight, and that is, I've got the clip. And I know she's going to look and roll her eyes at me, but for Lisa sitting in the back there, and we've spoken about her through the day, but I just thought, I just want to acknowledge Lisa's contributions. Not that you just do a fantastic job during the cyclone, as you've heard about. She's also just been awarded her Certified Emergency Manager accreditation through the International Association of Emergency Managers. So she originally was an associate, but she's been now up to the level, so she's on par with me. So no pressure, but well done. That's a fantastic achievement. There's only 14 of us in New Zealand, I think it is, last count. Yeah, so that's fantastic. And then she didn't stop there. Lisa decided that what New Zealand has to offer public information managers wasn't enough. So she looked at the Federal Emergency Management Agency in the United States and their program, which is a lot more advanced than ours. And we discussed it and we put it forward, and she had enrolled in the Advanced Public Information Officer program. She had to complete a whole lot of prerequisite courses and studies, which she did. This September, she did 5 days virtual course with the United States, where she's the first international candidate. The challenge she had was, because of the time difference, her day was starting at 1 a.m. So she had to be up at 1 a.m. every day doing courses and looking good. She was also referred to and welcomed as Lisa from New Zealand, Australia. So I think they still don't quite understand the difference between New Zealand and Australia. But interesting enough, Lisa had her eyes set on doing the master's program, which is the top level program in the United States. And we got that quote recently from them in their publication, and I'll read it there. The 2024 Master Public Information Officer cohort announced the Emergency Management Institute, which is the academy for the American FEMA, the training arm of the federal agency announced that the 2024 Master Public Information Officer cohort and will represent only the 8th class since the program's inception. 23 professionals representing 16 states from the US and our inaugural international professional from New Zealand was selected through a highly competitive application process. So Lisa got accepted to the Masters before she finished the advanced, so with a little bit of networking, we'll use that language. She passed the advanced and now she's set to go to the Masters, which is pretty much a year-long program. She'll be doing 3 residential courses in the United States and having to do a mini paper to be signed off. So I think this is outstanding and with acknowledgement from this committee of her professionalism and her dedication.
I'm going to break all meeting protocols and suggest we give her a round of applause for that. So thank you. Well done, Lisa. We knew you were awesome, but now it's in writing, so that's all good. Thank you. So, the end of your report, Clinton?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you. So, lastly, we have the update. Oh, sorry, I need a mover and seconder to receive the verbal report. I'll move that. Mayor Tapsell, all in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. And then we have the update from NEMA. This time, Ian Wilson is standing in for Lily. So I'd like to take those read, but if there's any questions on the report that's in the agenda, please ask away, and Ian should be able to help you. Any questions for Ian? No, looks like you're off the hook, Ian, so thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
In which case, I shall ask for a mover and seconder to receive the update report from NEMA. Councillor Campbell, Mayor Luca, all in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. I don't think there's any items not on the agenda. So with that, I shall ask Stace to give us a karakia whakamitanga and close the meeting. Yeah. Thank you, Stace. And with that, please do.
I hate to be boring and monotonous and all the rest of it, but thank you to Ruben for circulating a bit of new information that I didn't have. But on the nuclear war issue, I went to the Te Puke meeting and I asked the same question. That was 4 years ago. This is an article that says Ukraine invasion, experts say New Zealand should be preparing for nuclear war. And they cite some people who say more or less what I just said a few minutes ago, which I didn't know about. Professor Nick Wilson, who's a university professor and public health expert, and catastrophic risk researcher, Dr. Matt Boyd. So I think that stuff that you sent was really good, and I think we should circulate it to the entire committee. If we can do that, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
So that we put this on the radar at least. People are freaking out over the release of 1 million or so litres of mildly radioactive contaminated water at Fukushima as a result of the thing. Well, that's just going to be, that's nothing compared to what could potentially happen. And so we need to have it on the radar. I hope I don't have to mention it anymore.
Thank you, Mayor Luca. I'm sure that information from Ruben can be circulated as appropriate. So thank you for that. And with that, I will close the meeting at 11:59. Thank you very much.